Today we'll talk about CSS again, continue our learning, and I would like to touch upon the sign-in form. This is the website I have open. Remember, I opened the file index.html, and I'm going to zoom in just so you can see better, but the actual thing is not this big. And I click sign in, and we are in the signin.html page. Now, this form looks terrible, so we want to improve that. So that's one of the goals of today. And while we do that, I'll teach you a few more concepts on CSS and spacing in particular, and some nice tricks how you can centralize the styles for the form. And maybe we can do another sign up form too and learn a few more HTML stuff. Okay, so looking at this form, let me zoom in so you can see better. It looks really terrible, and one of the things I want to do, let me annotate here. First, there are every group is just too close to each other, so we want to learn how to put a space between them. Also, I don't like this label next to it, so I want to have the label on its own line like this. These are just my preferences, okay? You can design it however you want, but this is the way I'm thinking we could improve, so we can teach you the concepts. And the button, maybe you can style that, make it a little better than just plain. Maybe some other color that's suggestive of a submission or primary action. And yeah, let's see how we can start off. Maybe also between the label and the field should be some slide space. Okay. How do we go about doing that? So I'm going to right click here, inspect. And I'm using this one Firefox, but Chrome is the same functionality. Remember, Chrome, you're going to see the Elements tab, and the right-hand side, you're going to see the Styles tab. I'm using Firefox, so it says Inspector and Rules respectively, but it's the same. So here, I have the label selected, and I want the label to be on its own line, and I want it to push the input to another line. Now, we learned how to do that if we kind of artificially add a div, right, in HTML. I can actually change this HTML here just to see what it looks like. If I right-click, edit as HTML, I can actually try to place a div like that and like that. Obviously, you can always break a line if you find it hard to see, but it won't matter here. So basically, I enclose the label in a div. So now you can see it pushes the input, this one, to a new line. And if you recall, the reason it happens is because the div element by default has a CSS property of display set to the value block. Okay, if you want to know the default CSS property of an element, you can always click on that, and you go here to the Styles tab on Chrome and Rules in Firefox. Are you gonna go? I'm gonna show you Chrome and Firefox because I think they use different places. So in Firefox, you go to Computed and you mark Browser Styles, and then you're gonna click this text box and find a property. Instead of you scrolling, you can just type it here, display, and I can see it's block, the value. Now, if you didn't know the property name, you can sample through all the default values for each CSS property here. So this is also a way you can understand, it's for you to learn what all the default values for your browser for the CSS properties are. So you learn the CSS properties names as well. So it's very useful. Let me do on Firefox, sorry, on Chrome, because people use Chrome, many people. So let me see if I can find my Chrome here. Google Chrome. Here it is on Chrome, F12, open DevTools, click Elements tab. I'm going, another way you can, instead of right-click inspect, you can also go here, click this pointer in the top left of the panel for DevTools and point to the thing you want to analyze or investigate. So I'm going to click the label for email, and that's going to select or highlight it here. On the right-hand side, I can go and see the browser styles. I think, yeah, let me see, where is it here? Properties. We got user agent, but I need to find, oh, there you go. In Chrome, you got to click computed and scroll down, and you should see all of them here. Click show all, and then you can also filter on display, and you see that. Oh, sorry, I meant to click the div, right? Click the div. That's the example I give. You can see the div has display block, which is different from the label here that has display inline by default. So that's the problem. So to change the behavior, I'm gonna change the display property for the label to be block. So if I do that, it's gonna push the other thing to another line. That way I don't need an extra div enclosing the label. So I'm gonna go to styles and try it out. Remember, I can always go to styles and see what something looks like in real time just to test things out. So I click here, element.style. I'm gonna say display, and I'm gonna tab, and you can see Chrome suggests all the values for me. So you can sample through with the up and down arrow and see what it looks like. This is block what we want, but in case you're curious about the other ones, you can just go down and see what it does. And see, pretty much it's either next to each other or not. And this one is none, this one makes it disappear. So it doesn't display. Okay, and there's many others there you can sample through. But basically I want the block. So this is the style I want for this. Now, of course I type in the DevTools, but I make sure to copy this, by the way. What I'm going to demonstrate right now is that the DevTools forgets everything you type. When I click refresh, it's gone. And the reason for that is when I refresh, it makes a request to the server, and the server gives you back the HTML file as it originally was. So when we change in the DevTools, we don't actually change that file, right? We're not changing this for anybody else. We're just us in this current session here, but it's going to be gone forever. That's why I told you before, always make sure to copy your code back into your original. So let's go to Visual Studio Code. If you recall, this is the code, src directory. I'm changing the file for sign in, right? signin.html. And the one that I did was this one. But how can I do that? CSS for that. There's different ways, right? If you recall, the first one, I can add a style attribute with the value. I can do this. But this is not the recommended approach. Or I can do the style tag like this before the end of the head and place it there. But I need a selector, so I can put label. But if I use that one, all of them will be targeted, right? All the labels. So if I don't want that, I would have to change this to ID, for example, email field, and I would say hash here, right? I want to target an element that has the ID email field, which we know it's unique, and only one element will have that ID. This one works, but it's still not the preferred way for either where I place the CSS, where I write it, and how I use the selector. Okay, so instead of writing it here, we want to isolate that into an external file. So I could create a separate style sheet just for sign in. So we can do signin.css. And I'm going to paste that code that I had. Let me open split down here. I right click the tab and split down so I can open it in the bottom. And I have signin.html on the top. So I can cut this and paste it here like that. And instead of style in the HTML file, I'm going to use link tag. Attribute rel is style sheet, always. And then the href is where is the file? Well, it's relative to where we are in signin.html in the same directory. We can just say signin.css and it will know how to find it. Link is a self-closing tag. You don't have to say the slash link like this. Okay, that way we can have, if you want to open this to the side of VS Code, you can Control Shift P or click View Command Palette, show preview from the live preview extension to quickly see it that email is actually occupying the whole row. But like I said, I don't recommend using ID here. We want to use usually a class. But instead of doing that, I want to show you a different approach because, when we have forms, we're going to have many labels, right? Label for the email, label for password, maybe label for date, some kind of date or time. There's so many labels. We don't want to be adding. Of course, we could add a class for each one of them, but I want to teach you a different way to actually target or select the children of an element that has a class. And I'll show what it means. So basically what I'm going to do is remove this ID. So I'm going to consider the following. Every single label and input will be part of this div, right? Div is a generic container. And this I'll be calling a group, a form group. And then I'll give a class to the div, the parent of label and input. By the way, this terminology is very commonly used when we talk about HTML because the structure is seen, it can be thought of as a tree. And this tree is like spanning. And this label is a child of this div. And this input is a child of this div. Therefore, the label parent is the div. The input parent is the div. So we can think of it that way, okay? So the label and the input are siblings, okay? So you're gonna hear that terminology a lot as you talk about HTML because the structure is a tree. You're gonna hear the term DOM tree, document object model tree, something like that, okay? Anyway, I'm gonna always pass a class here, call it form group, so that every single form group that I have will have the class like this. So with that, I'm going to go back here to the selector for the CSS, and I want to target the label, right? But that label is a child of the div whose class is form group. How do I approach that? Well, I'm going to do it thinking backwards, okay? First, I want to target a label, so I could do that. But if I write it this way, all the labels in the document will be targeted. Can we be more specific? I only want to do that if this label is a child of an element whose class is form group. So I can go backwards to the left, add a space, and I say dot form dash group. Now this is saying a label anywhere inside an element whose class is form group. And that matches exactly this. Okay. Now, if you don't remember what I said, there's always the Visual Studio Code feature that if I point my mouse over the selector, it lets me know what that is. So reading this again, okay, it says an element whose class is form group, okay, dot, dot, dot means could be anywhere as a child or a descendant, right? Could be nested in another tag, as long as it's within the element. And the element is label. So that's what it means. A label somewhere in the tree of the element whose class is form group. Okay. Now, the dot, 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 I don't know if you understood that. It just means that I could have, for example, a div here. But notice how this lib is not necessarily, is no longer a child of the div with the class form group, although this is still going to work because of that dot, dot that you see. It could be anywhere as long as under that. It doesn't matter if it's inside a div or another element. It doesn't matter. Now, if you do care about that, you want a direct child, it's possible to do that if you change the selector. And you would have to go here and between the class name and the label, you have to say with a space greater than. What this is now telling, it's okay, I want a label that is a direct child, like immediately under that div class form group. Now this is not going to work anymore if I do it like that. Let's see. Okay. If you hover over that, the dot, dot, dot is gone. Now you might have noticed nothing changed. That's because the div it's display block. So let me shoot another element. Maybe a span. That'll be clearer. See that it's not applied anymore. But it doesn't have, could we have a div and make color, let's say color red, right? Maybe that's clearer to you. You see the color is not changing because this label is not like this. You see, like that it works because it's directly under the div whose class form group. Now this doesn't work. See the difference? This is the greater than. This is without the greater than, which doesn't apply. So we got to understand the difference there, like that, okay? Hope that's clear. If not clear, just you can always go back here and hover over to remind yourself, and you can always play around like this and like that. Anyway, I like doing it like this, so I'm immediately very specific. So let me remove the color. Okay, so we're gonna do that for the label for password. So how do we do that? Instead of going to the label directly, I go to the parent, which is the div here, and add a class form group. And notice how I use the same class because I already wrote it. You only write it once, use it as many times as you want. You don't have to rewrite it again. Don't repeat yourself. That's the whole point of this. Okay, and because of this, I can control all of the labels by just going to the code here. For example, I want them to have color blue. All of them will change at the same time. And that's why this technique is so powerful. You can have a central place that changes everywhere in the form. So that's very nice. Okay, I'm going to revert the color. I don't want that. Nice. So we talk about display, inline versus block. Okay. Block is it doesn't let anybody next to it. Inline is okay, you can stay next to me. Now let's talk about spacing. I don't like that email is too close to the text field. I would like some slight space under that. How would I approach that? What is the property? Now to do that, I need to teach you about the box model. So let's go to from externally. You might have noticed if you open the DevTools, let's choose refresh here. Let's choose this form group, maybe the label. Click the label there. You notice on the right-hand side, if you scroll down, there's this box. That's called a box model. And Firefox more explicit, I think it says box model. You might have to click computed tab in Firefox. So this is the spacing model. So we have the content. Let me scroll this. The content itself, that's the inner part. We have the spacing between the border and the inner content, that's called padding. And we have the spacing outside the border called margin. Now let's better understand that by practice. First, I'm going to add a border surrounding that. So I'm going to click here, I can say border. Now this property is interesting. It has 3 values. It's called a shorthand property. So I want the border to be, let's say, 2 pixels, 2 px, space, and I want the type of border to be solid, the style, border style, and space, I want the color to be green, like that. So this is what's called shorthand property in CSS. You can hover over that and it'll tell you shorthand property for setting border width, style, and color. So if you were to do that separately, you would have to write border width 2px, border style 2px, and then border color. Sorry, solid, right? And then border color green. See? So you can either type everything in one property with the shorthand or use the individual ones. Obviously, the individual ones is typing more. So some people might prefer just using border like that. Okay, and you also can use the specific ones if you just want to change the width and not necessarily the style color. So usually the shorthand properties, they take more than one value. And when you do that, you separate them with space. You can see here, there's one value here, space, another value, space, another. And you might be wondering, how do you know the order of values? What is what? You gotta just read the docs and understand how it is. And it comes from experience, having done this multiple times. But I'll teach you a documentation resource called MDN. That's really useful. Mozilla Developer Network documentation. This is the website. You can search for the property here, border, and it will tell you what it is. I'll paste that to the Zoom chat. So it gives you like an overview what that property does, some examples if you click around. And if you scroll down to syntax section, you can see these examples, and it will tell you what each value is. The one that we used was the third one. Sorry, the fourth one here. You can see first, the value is the width, second is the style, and third is the color. So that's how you understand how to use that. And you might have noticed you can also pass only two or only one value as well. And what they mean for two, for example, is just the first is the style, second is the color. So a very good resource. I recommend checking it out if you're unsure about certain CSS property or you want to learn more about the values and the syntax. Going back to what we were doing. So I added a border, right? Everybody knows what a border is. It's just some sort of line surrounding the box or the rectangle. So you can play around here, clicking here, up, down, to see what it looks like with a lot of border, less border. I'm going to exaggerate with 6. And then you can choose the different styles. It could be like dashed, for example. It's like that. Or like dotted is like the dots. Anyway, I'm going to keep solid for now. Okay. Now, you could have space between the text and the border or space outside the border. So to add space inside, it's called padding. So let's use the shorthand, padding. And then let's start with 1 px, and then you press up to increase. See what's happening? As I increase padding, the space between the border and the content itself, inner content, is increasing. Now it increases on the top, right, bottom, and left. Now, the reason I just told you these keywords are important because they are predominant in CSS. So when I use the shorthand property, I am changing not only top, but right, bottom, and left space for the padding. You can also be very specific. If you just want to change one side, you would have to write, for example, let me remove that I just want space to the left. That's padding dash left. Padding dash left. And this pattern is very common in CSS. You're going to see whatever property, dash left, or dash right, or dash top, or dash bottom. So if you do that one and increase, it would just add to the left. Okay? Let's go back to the shorthand that adds to all sides. Now you learned about padding. Now what's the space outside? That's the margin. So we can use the shorthand, and guess what? It's just the same margin, same pattern. Let's start 1 pixels and increase. You see what's happening? Outside the space is increasing on all sides. And that's margin, space outside. Padding, space inside, margin, space outside. Just remember that. And again, if you want to use just one side, maybe just one padding, margin to the bottom. That's what we want, right? Margin dash bottom. That's exactly what I want. I want some space between the email label and the input. So we're going to use margin bottom. Obviously, I'm exaggerating right now, so we're going to calibrate that to less. But before I do that, scroll down here, you're going to see this box again. And that's just a reminder of the box model. If you ever forget about the box model, just open the DevTools and look at this box. You see, inner content. This is the width cross height in pixels. And you can see padding is the space inside, right, within the border. Border padding. You can see highlights green, if you can see the color green. And the number 0 just means padding top, padding right, padding bottom, and padding left. Same thing for border. Numbers top, right, left, and bottom. And then outside is no margin except for the bottom, 24. And it's kind of beige gray. I don't know how this color is. All right, so that's the box model. Now, I don't want this padding anymore. I don't want border. All I want is a margin bottom. Maybe that's too much. Let's try 4. What do you think? 8 or 4? 8. Let's do 8. Copy this. Back to the code. Remember, I'm targeting labels. I already have a selector here. I just have to add that here, and we got margin to the bottom of each, to the bottom of email and part of password. All of them changed, so long as the container parent has the class form group. Okay, now I really don't like that the input is too close to the next group, right? Visually, it's next to the label for the next thing. I don't like that. How would you go about adding some space between them? I just want to point out that there's different ways you can accomplish the same thing in CSS. Okay, there's no one single way. For example, if I want space between this and this password, obviously I can look at different perspectives. I can look from the perspective of password. I could add either a padding to the top or a margin to the top, right? Or I can go to the input, add margin bottom, padding bottom, not padding, sorry, because padding is outside of the border. Just margin bottom, right? Or I could go to the parent, which is this div, and add a margin bottom. That also works. That's the one I recommend. So I'm going to go here to CSS. How can we target this div? Anybody want to guess? What's the selector you're going to use for this element? If I want to change style for this and that. We have a class, right? So we target by class name. We start with what punctuation when we want to say select an element by its class? Dot. Form group is the name of the class. Curly brace. This is targeting all elements whose class is form group. And I want to add margin bottom. Let's do 16px and see what happened. To the bottom of each, there is a margin. Let's look at the DevTools. Maybe it's better to visualize. Refresh, because I changed the code. I'm going to point to this and click on the container. You see the form group highlighted? That's highlighted at the bottom is the margin bottom. That way, every one of them at the bottom will have some margin. This one also has it too. So there's a very quick way, a nice way to separate things. And you can see on the right-hand side, there's a margin bottom 16 applied to the elements whose class form group. So before, after. Uncheck is before, check is after. Okay, nice. Looking better, much better than before. How about we make the label in bold letters? How would we do that? That's called the weight, font weight. So locate the selector for the labels. I want all of them to be bold. So you would go here, this one, line 5. You're going to say font dash weight, colon. Now the value could be several. You could just say bold. That's okay. But you can also be more specific as to what, when you have fonts, they kind of have the different levels of bold. So you could have like 500, which is pretty much not bold. 600, which is, it looks bold now already, right? And there's 700. And you can look up MDN, or you can use the DevTools auto suggestion feature, like I showed you, to see what possible values you can have here. But anyway, you can say bold if you want. Like that. Now notice I don't like the font for this page, actually. So if you recall from index.html, we actually included Google fonts, right, for Montserrat here. And in the CSS for index.css, we only apply that to the Lauren paragraph, the class element whose class is that, and we did font family. How do we apply the font family to the whole document instead of just one element? That's what I'm going to show you. So going back to signin.css, what we have to do is target the body tag, which is the one that encloses all whole content that people see. So we can go here. Let me do it before. Selector for body, and we're going to change font family to Montserrat, 2 R's. And I want to put a fallback to sans serif in case it doesn't exist anymore. And you change the font for the whole document. Okay. That's the body selector. Basically, it'll target everything under the body. And the reason it changed, if you're asking why everything in the body changed, it's due to inheritance. Basically, the children elements of body, they inherit the font family. Let's see in the DevTools. You can see there's remember, when we have an HTML document, we have the top level HTML tag and then two things, the head and the body. The body is what everybody sees in the content of the website. So you can, this is actually what we styled, right? On the right-hand side, you can see this is what we wrote. So if we uncheck, it's like that. But why do the other elements adopt the same font? And if you click any one of them, like the 8 or the H1, you can scroll down. You see this? Inherited from body, font family Montserrat. So that's why there's an inheritance mechanism, meaning all the children of the body, all the descendants, their font family will be inherited. Unless you specify a different one, right? Explicit. That's the mechanism. Okay, so let's see. We got the spacing, we got the font. How about the button? But before I do that, I think I didn't teach you about placeholder attribute for inputs. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code. Sometimes when you look at forms, you see that there's some text already typed, kind of floating in the input. Although when you click, it disappears. That's called a placeholder. And it's just a suggestion or tip to what the user should type. That's very easy to do. Locate the input, and you add the placeholder attribute like this. For example, I want to give an example, mail@example.com. And you see there's this kind of gray fading text. It's like it's meant for the user to understand what he should type there, like what's the pattern. And when he clicks, starts typing, it goes away, right? Very common feature that you might see out there. I can do the same for password, although it's kind of everybody knows you should type, but basically placeholder. I don't even know if it's gonna show. It's actually showing. Star, 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 star about that. And then when I start typing, it's bullet points. What's going on here? It's faded. I don't know why. That's weird. Something is weird in this. Let me restart. There you go. Okay, let's touch on this button. Remember we did button type submit. So like you can always target an element by a class. You can always make a new class and do it, but I'm going to show you like a different way to select this. So every form, right, form element usually only has one submit button, a button of type submit. So that's the assumption, okay? And how can I target this one instead of a class if I target the form from the form itself here? I want all the submit buttons for any one form element to be designed or laid out the same way. Let's go here, selector. So it's a button, but it's not any kind of button because you could have multiple buttons. It's a type submit. So how can I be more specific about the attribute of the button? You can actually type the brackets here and say type submit like this. So this is targeting any button whose type attribute has value submit. You got to use the square brackets like this. Now, I want it to be always inside a form. If you recall here, if I scroll, you see this button is inside a form, right? So I can add the form name before the space. So remember, if you don't remember, hover over it. And it's telling you there's a button with the attribute type having the value submit somewhere as an ancestor, a descendant of a form element. That's why the dot, dot, dot. Okay, and then let's style that. Let's say background color, maybe some kind of blue. We can calibrate and then color white. I don't like the spacing is just too close together to the border. Anybody remember what's the name of the property for the space inside between the content and the border? That's the padding, right? Now, if I do 16, it's like that. I kind of don't like that. Can I just do separate the top and bottom from right and left? Of course, you can write them out, right? You can have padding top, padding bottom, padding right, padding left. Did I type them all? But this is tedious. People like to be lazy in programming. So instead, they use shorthand, which is this one. But this one is changing all. Can I just change the top and bottom, for example? Yes, you can. You can do like this. Let me remove the others. So like I said, read MDN to know what it's doing. We can play around with DevTools. Let's play around. Go into Chrome, refresh, inspect this. Let's play around with the padding. Click here. If I go down, press down, down, down. What's doing? Oh, that's changing the padding top and bottom, right? Oh, let's calibrate. I like 8. That's good to me. Now I want more on the left and right. So this one, oh, it's changing left and right. Let's do 16. Something like that, okay? So that's how I play around and trial and error. You understand what the values are doing. Great, I'm going to copy this back to my code. Nice. I don't like the border. It's kind of pointy on the edges. Can we make it rounded? Yes. It's called border dash radius. And this is the shorthand for all the sides, all the edges. You can start 1 and then go increasingly rounded, like 8. That's 8. I think that's too much. Maybe I just want 4. Slightly rounded. If you can see it, it's slightly rounded there. And I think there's something weird about the style of the border. I don't know what it is. There's some shadow, whatever there. Let's inspect in the DevTools. Maybe we can change that. I can see, scroll down, there's some weird properties from the user agent with the default style for the browser. And Yeah, there's some stuff there. Maybe look at the computed show all. Let me look at border here. Look for border. There's so many properties related to border. Let's see what the style is. What's the style? It doesn't say. Block and style outside. Okay, let me change it. Let's change the border style to dashed. Oh, actually, that might not even be a border, right? Dash. Cannot see. Maybe there isn't a border. Let me put border with 5 pixels. Oh, there you go. We exaggerate to see if there's a border. There is. I exaggerate there. I don't like that stuff. That's weird to me. So maybe we can just remove the border altogether. Well, let me try the style here, just for fun. And this is dashed, dotted. Okay, so we couldn't see because it's too small, but it's actually changing it. Oh, there's hidden, which is basically no border, right? None is just kind of hidden as well. And they're solid. Yeah, I don't want border. Maybe I can put none. How about that? And I'm gonna take that out. And here I would paste the code. Okay, so let me switch to a cool effect that you can apply to that button, which is the box shadow property. You might have seen that. So if we do box-shadow, this one we have to use several values. Let's start with 1px, space 1px, space 1px, space the color, put black. And I'll explain to you what this means at the DevTools. Let's go. Refresh. Oh, let's go here. You can see a box shadow. What is that? Well, it's literally a box shadow. And the first value is the X offset. So if I increase, the shadow is going to the right. If I decrease, to the left. Okay? So I'm exaggerating so you can see the shadow there. Yeah, the second value is the Y offset. If you increase, it goes down. If you decrease, it goes up. Okay? Finally, the last one is the blur. So if you increase, it gets blurry. If you decrease, it's less blurry, more solid, opaque, right? And the third is the color. You can change to whatever. Okay, let's calibrate that. Maybe you want to slide to the right and down. It's like that. It's kind of used to give an effect of depth. Like if you're, remember, if you're playing like a video game in arcade, they have buttons that you press, right? It's kind of like that effect. When you press the button, you can make like a CSS effect. When you hover over it or click, the button will go down as though it's pressed. We can try that. So let's see. I like black. Let's see, black. Yeah, and I like a little bit blur like that. You can change to whatever you think is nice. So make sure to copy back the values. Here. There you go. Now let me teach you a cool effect. Let's say when I point my mouse and hover this button, I want it to kind of make the effect of being pushed. Okay, or basically there's no shadow anymore. It's kind of, it will move a little bit to the right and down, I think. We can use the pseudo-class selector. And the way we do that is like this. So let's first copy the same selector because we want to target that button. But now we're going to put :hover. What this means is I want a style to be applied when the hover action is active. Hover is when you have the pointer over it, right? And we can first of all, maybe you can eliminate the shadow. think you can say none. Yeah, there you go. See that when I hover is gone? You can either do that or you can actually move the button to be covering the shadow. I think that's better approach. Let's see. If I remove this. How can I translate the button around about its original place? We're gonna use left property like this, but it doesn't work by itself. You have to combine with another property called position. So position relative, and if I increase left, that should move it around, but let's see what's going on. Why is it not moving? Because I got to hover. Sorry. Yeah, there you go. That's the problem because the shadow is moving accordingly. So maybe I should remove the shadow. There's different ways to go about solving this problem. So let's see. That's not the right place, right? How much of the shadow? That's 3, right? So it has to be 3 here, I think, to give like the sense it's being pushed. And then to go down, I got to go top 3px, I think. Yeah, there you go. Something like that. Okay, so if you want to position an element like to shift its position, make the position property relative, and you can manipulate with left and top. There's also right and bottom, and you can guess what they do, right? The right, it kind of pushes it to the left. It's kind of weird. You have to think of the opposite. Imagine it's just adding space to the left or adding space to the top, adding space to the right. That's how I think about it when I remember. If I want to push to the right, I just think of it as adding space to the left. When I want to push to the left, I think of it as adding space to the right. Something like that. Okay, save and let's look at Chrome. So you can see the button. So if when I hover, it kind of gives the effect that it's pressed. When you press a button in real life, it goes down the thing, right? The hole. So I don't know. What do you think? Just a fun thing to teach you the position and box shadow. And you learn the pseudo-class hover. By the way, if you want to debug that in DevTools and you have a hard time, hey, how can you debug if my pointer cannot be there and here at the same time, right? What the hell? It's easy. Click that, inspect. You can go to this, you see that colon hub? Click that, and you can change, activate one state, element state. One of them is hover. Remember, that's the one we're using. You can click that, and it'll be acting as though you have a pointer there. So you can see what's before hover, after. Before, after, which is the press button effect. Very useful. You can also do that for other stuff, other pseudo-class selectors, like these other ones that we haven't talked about. We can look it up. Okay. Yeah, I think I'll call it a lesson.